Security was extremely tight as the motorcade bearing French President Mitterrand passed through the gates of the Coast Guard Reserve Training Center. Moments later, the helicopter carrying President Reagan appeared overhead, landing moments later on a cleared field inside the Coast Guard station. The President and Mrs. Reagan were greeted by Governor and Mrs. Dalton. From there, the President and his entourage drove to and then down a long pier to the French frigate de Grasse, named for the French general who blockaded Chesapeake Bay and trapped British commander Lord Cornwallis. In the York River, Coast Guard boats spewed brightly colored water. On the de Grasse, a 21-gun salute heralded the arrival of the American president. In the ship's junior officers' mess, the two leaders exchanged toasts. Mitterrand noted disagreements between the United States and France, but said areas of agreement are far broader and deeper. Mr. Reagan, in his salute, recalled the assistance the French provided 200 years ago.
For France and the United States are old, firm allies. You came to America when we needed you, and we went to France when you had need of us. Well, the commitment still holds.
Presidents Reagan and Mitterrand then spent the next 2 hours eating and talking. The first meal and the first chat these two world leaders have ever had together. After lunch, the two presidents emerged, reviewed a line of French sailors, then departed separately for Williamsburg, where more substantive discussions were planned. Kathy Midkiff picks up the story there.
A hopeful crowd of hundreds began arriving outside Williamsburg's Lightfoot House as early as 11 o'clock this morning. Visitors craned their necks and aimed their cameras, waiting for a glimpse of the presidents from two countries. But the Secret Service was playing a kind of presidential shell game, not letting anyone in on where the president's helicopter would land and when. By 3:45, Secretary of State Alexander Haig arrived for diplomatic talks with the two world leaders. Several minutes later, a limousine motorcade whisked President Reagan past the waiting crowd and around to the back door of Lightfoot House, frustrating the crowd and a whole host of photographers. But when French President Francois Mitterrand arrived to get down to business with the president, the crowd got its glimpse at the man who's been whisked into many back doors since the attempt on his life.
The press can't do the things that they used to do. It's gotten so tight that we even have to go through metal detectors and searches. The gear has to be searched. It's just been outrageous lately, but I think it's necessary.
So you didn't find it at all unusual that they changed the location of the arrival?
No, it's been that way. They'll say one thing and then they'll move it around, and if the Secret Service doesn't think it's safe enough or it's too open, they will decide to change it around a lot.
When the official photos were taken, the talks began. The leaders were expected to discuss, among other issues, the arms race, specifically the French sales of weapons to Libya. After a brief appearance at a state governor's dinner at the Williamsburg Lodge, both leaders headed for the colonial governor's mansion, where President Reagan was scheduled to host a dinner for the French president and his wife. Both leaders will leave the area tomorrow, but they'll meet again later this week at the Third World Economic Summit in Mexico. In Williamsburg, Kathy Midkiff, The Daily News.
A carefully screened crowd of journalists, dignitaries, and specially invited VIPs were the only ones the Secret Service permitted within the ropes surrounding the battlefield. The rest of the public was kept several hundred yards away. Veteran White House reporters say it was the assassination of Egyptian President Sadat that prompted the Secret Service to tighten already stringent security measures. But the metal detectors, trained dogs, and hundreds of police and bodyguards didn't spoil the day. Pageantry won out, thanks to the thousands of American and foreign bands and marching units which filled the battlefield. President Reagan arrived accompanied by French President Mitterrand. They took their places behind an 1.5 inch thick sheet of bulletproof glass, sharing the stage with a host of national and state leaders, including gubernatorial opponents Coleman and Robb, who were seated uncomfortably, it seemed, side by side. With the crowd shivering in a brisk wind, a long series of speeches began, the longest by the Lord Chancellor of England, the most pointed by President Mitterrand, who took the side of third world nations still struggling for independence, saying the lessons of Yorktown must be shared with them before it is too late.
Des péripéties de cette guerre qui n'en finissait pas.
In his remarks, President Reagan, too, found a lesson from the Yorktown experience.
The wounds of this battle have long since healed. Our nations have matured, and bonds of friendship now exist between one-time enemies. The same has been true of other wars since. which makes you wonder if after all the hatred, all the pain, and all the sacrifice, we find ourselves able to be friends and allies. Why couldn't we find ourselves able to be friends without first going to war?
But the president ended on an optimistic note.
We can look at our past with pride, and our future can be whatever we make it. And as has been said already today, God bless America.
The most colorful event of the day was next, the review of troops representing the nations who fought the war for independence. A flyover of jet fighters closed the ceremonies, which began on time but ended nearly an hour late. By speaking here today, President Reagan continued a tradition begun by two of his Republican predecessors, Chester Arthur in 1881 and Herbert Hoover in 1931. However, there was a difference today. Although thousands of people were able to hear the president live and in person, relatively few were able to see him because of the tight security, which leaves one to wonder whether the American president 50 years from now will feel safe enough to even attend this important commemoration. At the Yorktown Bicentennial, Joel Rubin, The Daily News.